The Dominion had ruled over 40 star systems for nearly 1,000 years. They were tall, skinned creatures with 4 arms and eyes that could see in complete darkness. Their empire was built on conquest, and they had never lost a war. When they wanted a planet, they took it. When a species refused to surrender, that species stopped existing. Admiral Hen stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Victory, and stared at the blue and green world spinning slowly below him. Terran Prime, a human colony established just 15 years ago on the edge of Dominion space. The planet was rich in rare minerals that the Dominion needed for their warships. The humans had been told to leave. They had refused. This annoyed Hen greatly. He had offered them fair terms. They could pack their belongings, board their primitive ships, and return to there. The Dominion would even allow them to keep their personal possessions. It was generous, far more generous than most species received. But the humans had said no. Their colony administrator, a woman named Maria Vance, had sent back a message that Hen still remembered word for word. "This is our home now. We built it with our own hands. We're not leaving." Such foolishness, such pointless bravery. Hen had seen it before in other species, this stubborn refusal to accept reality. It always ended the same way. He turned to his second in command, a younger officer named Al. "Prepare the drop pods. We're deploying the Ravagers." Al's 4 eyes widened slightly, all of them Admiral. "All 20,000. I want this finished quickly. The High Command is growing impatient." The Ravagers were the Dominion's most terrible weapon. They were not soldiers or machines. They were living creatures, bred in laboratories over hundreds of years to be perfect killing machines. Each one stood 3 meters tall, covered in scales harder than most metals. They had 6 legs ending in claws that could tear through steel, and jaws powerful enough to bite through the hull of a small spacecraft. They were not intelligent. They could not be reasoned with or negotiated with. They existed only to hunt, to kill, and to feed. When released on a planet, they would hunt every living thing until nothing remained. Then they would go dormant, waiting to be collected and deployed again. 17 worlds had surrendered the moment the Dominion threatened to release Ravagers. The 4 worlds that had not surrendered were now lifeless rocks, their populations nothing but bones scattered across empty cities. Hen watched as the drop pods launched from his ship, streaking down through the atmosphere like metal rain. Each pod contained 50 Ravagers in hibernation. When the pods hit the ground, the Ravagers would wake up hungry. He allowed himself a small smile. By tomorrow, the humans would be begging to surrender. By next week, there would be no humans left to beg. He was wrong on both counts. Far below, on the outskirts of a town called New Houston, a farmer named Hank was fixing his tractor when he saw the first pods falling from the sky. He was 63 years old, with white hair and hands rough from decades of work. He had been a hunter back on Earth before retiring to the colonies, and he had seen enough nature documentaries to know what invasion looked like. He walked calmly to his house, opened his gun safe, and began loading weapons onto his truck. 17 rifles of various sizes, 4 shotguns, 2 pistols, and enough ammunition to fight a small war which he had always kept just in case. His wife came out of the house. She was 60 years old and had been a competitive shooter in her youth. "What's happening?" "Aliens are dropping something on us, probably not a welcoming party." He handed her a rifle. "Get the neighbors on the radio. Tell them to bring whatever guns they have to the town hall, and tell to bring her medical kit." "You think it's going to be that bad?" Hank looked up at the sky, where hundreds more pods were falling. "I think it's going to be interesting." Across the colony, similar scenes were playing out. In the capital city of New Washington, Maria Vance was already on the emergency broadcast system, her voice calm and clear. "This is Colony Administrator Vance. We are under attack. All citizens are to proceed to designated shelter areas immediately. Do not panic. Bring any weapons you have. We are going to defend our home." She clicked off the microphone and turned to her aide, a young man named Danny Price. "Get me a count of every weapon in this colony. Guns, knives, mining equipment, anything that can be used to fight." Danny was pale but steady. "Ma'am, we don't even know what we're fighting yet." "Then let's find out." The first Ravager emerged from its pod in a field outside New Houston. It shook off the hibernation fluid and raised its massive head, sniffing the air. It could smell prey. Many prey. Soft, weak creatures filled with warm blood. The hunger that was its entire existence roared to life. It began to run toward the town, its 6 legs eating up the ground at terrifying speed. Behind it, 49 more Ravagers emerged from the same pod, all of them running in the same direction. They never reached the town. Hank had positioned himself on a small hill overlooking the field. He lay flat on his stomach, his favorite hunting rifle pressed against his shoulder. It was a .50 caliber weapon, designed for taking down the massive rock boars that lived in the mountains. The rock boars had armored hides that could stop most bullets. He had learned to aim for the eyes. The first Ravager was 300 meters away when Hank fired. The bullet covered the distance in less than a second and punched through the creature's left eye, destroying its brain instantly. The Ravager collapsed mid-stride, skidding across the grass in a spray of dark blood. The other Ravagers paused, confused. Nothing had ever hurt one of them before. They had no experience with threats, only prey. Hank fired again. Another Ravager fell. By the time the remaining creatures figured out where the shots were coming from, Hank had killed 7 of them. They charged toward his position, screaming in rage, and ran directly into the ambush he had prepared. 23 colonists rose from their hiding spots in the tall grass, all of them armed with whatever they had. Rifles cracked. Shotguns boomed. One man named Carl had brought a hunting bow, and while his arrows didn't penetrate the Ravager's scales, they distracted the creatures long enough for others to get kill shots. The battle lasted 4 minutes. When it was over, all 50 Ravagers lay dead in the field. The colonists had lost 2 people, a young woman named who had been too slow to dodge a claw swipe, and an older man named George who had died protecting his teenage son. Hank stood among the bodies, reloading his rifle. His hands were steady. His heart was calm. He had been hunting dangerous animals his entire life. These things were bigger than most, but they died the same as everything else. He looked at the sky, where more pods were still falling. "This is going to be a long night," he said. He was right about that, at least. The sun set on Terran Prime, and the real fighting began. Ravagers were nocturnal hunters. Their eyes could see heat signatures in complete darkness, and their sense of smell could track prey from kilometers away. In the 1,000 years since they had been created, no species had ever survived a night against them. The humans did something unexpected. They turned on all the lights. Maria Vance had ordered every generator in the colony activated. Floodlights pointed outward from every town and settlement. The Ravagers, approaching in what they thought was protective darkness, suddenly found themselves blind and exposed. Then the shooting started. In the farming town of, a man named Earl Tucker had spent the afternoon welding steel plates onto his combine harvester. The massive farming machine was designed to cut through fields of grain, but Earl figured it would cut through alien monsters just as well. His wife, Ruth, thought he was crazy. "You're going to get yourself killed," she said as he climbed into the cab. "Maybe," Earl admitted, "but I'm going to take a whole lot of these ugly things with me." He drove the harvester straight into a pack of 30 Ravagers that had been approaching the town. The spinning blades, designed to cut through tough alien crops, tore through the creatures like they were made of paper. Dark blood sprayed across the windshield. Earl turned on the wipers and kept driving. Ruth, sitting beside him with a shotgun, fired through a hole Earl had cut in the door. "You're enjoying this," she said. "Little bit," he admitted. Across the planet, humans were discovering something important about themselves. They were not helpless. They were not weak. They were the descendants of people who had hunted mammoths with wooden spears, who had sailed across oceans in boats made of wood and cloth, who had climbed the highest mountains and crossed the hottest deserts simply because those things existed. The Ravagers were big and strong and terrifying, but humans had been killing big, strong, terrifying things since before they invented writing. In New Houston, Hank had organized the colonists into hunting parties. Each party had at least 5 people with guns, plus others carrying lights and making noise to drive the Ravagers into kill zones. It was the same technique his grandfather had used to hunt wild boars back in Texas, just scaled up for bigger prey. Remember, he told his people, these things are animals. They don't think, they just react. We're smarter than them. Use that. A young woman named Brooks, only 19 years old, had killed her first Ravager with a mining laser. The creature had broken into the shelter where she was protecting a group of children and had grabbed the first thing she could find. The laser, designed to cut through rock, burned a hole straight through the Ravager's skull. After that, she went hunting for more. Her father, Brooks, found her at dawn, covered in dark blood and carrying a makeshift spear she had built from a steel pipe and a kitchen knife. She had killed 6 Ravagers during the night, 5 with the laser and 1 with the spear when the laser's battery died. "You okay?" asked. Looked at him with eyes that had seen too much too quickly. "I'm alive, so are the kids, that's what matters." Pulled her into a hug. She was shaking, but not from fear. The adrenaline was wearing off and her body was realizing what it had done. "I'm proud of you," he said. "I don't feel proud, I feel sick." "That's normal, that means you're still human." The first night cost the colony 91 lives. Teachers, farmers, miners, children, and elderly. People who had never held a weapon in their lives. People who had simply been in the wrong place when a Ravager broke through the defenses. But it cost the Ravagers more than 800 of their number. By dawn, the surviving creatures had learned something that their simple brains could barely process. These prey fought back. These prey were dangerous. Admiral Henn received the casualty reports on his flagship and refused to believe them. He ordered the surveillance drones to verify the numbers. The footage they sent back changed everything. He watched a group of humans chase a pack of Ravagers through a forest. Not flee from. Chase. They moved like predators, coordinating their movements, cutting off escape routes, driving the creatures toward an ambush where more humans waited with weapons ready. One human, a red-haired woman named Sandra Cole, was killing wounded Ravagers with a sharpened piece of metal attached to a wooden pole. The Dominion's database identified this weapon as a spear, a tool so primitive that most galactic civilizations had stopped using it before they discovered fire. Sandra Cole was using it to hunt the most dangerous creatures the Dominion had ever created. The Admiral's second-in-command, Al, watched the footage with growing horror. "This is impossible. The Ravagers have never been defeated. Never." "Clearly our information about humans was incomplete," Henn said. His voice was calm, but his 4 hands were trembling. "What do we do?" "We wait. There are still more than 19,000 Ravagers on that planet. The humans cannot sustain these losses. They will break." But the humans did not break. On the second night, the Ravagers tried a different approach. Instead of attacking the towns directly, they targeted the power generators. Without lights, the humans would lose their advantage. The humans had expected this. Maria Vance had ordered backup generators placed throughout every settlement, along with thousands of battery-powered lights and flares. When the main power failed, the backup systems kicked in immediately. And then the humans counterattacked. Teams of colonists drove out into the darkness in armored vehicles, hunting the Ravagers who had attacked the generators. They used thermal cameras taken from mining equipment to see in the dark. They used explosive charges originally designed for clearing rock to create traps and ambushes. A man named Pete Hayes led one of these teams. His wife had died on the first night, tackling a Ravager to save a group of children. Pete had not slept since. He had not stopped fighting since. "There," he said, pointing to a heat signature on his screen. "6 of them hiding in that cave." His team moved into position. They had learned that Ravagers could not swim, so they had brought water pumps from the mining operation. The plan was simple but effective. "Flood them out," Pete ordered. Water rushed into the cave. The Ravagers came scrambling out, confused and angry, directly into the waiting guns of Pete's team. 6 shots, 6 kills. Pete marked the location on his map. "That's 47, he said. "Let's find more." By the end of the second night, Ravager casualties had passed 2,000. Human casualties were 112. The ratio was improving. In her command center, Maria Vance studied the numbers and allowed herself a small moment of hope. They were winning. Against all odds, against the most terrible weapon the galaxy had ever seen, they were winning. Her aide, Danny Price, brought her coffee. "The Admiral has been trying to contact us," he said. "I think he wants to negotiate." Maria sipped her coffee. It was terrible, made from recycled water and synthetic beans, but it was hot and she needed the warmth. "Let him wait. We're busy." "Busy doing what?" She looked at the tactical display, where dozens of hunting teams were tracking the remaining Ravagers across the continent, showing the galaxy what humans are made of. By the end of the first week, the Ravagers had learned fear. This was not supposed to be possible. The Dominion scientists had designed them without the ability to feel fear. They were supposed to be relentless, unstoppable, incapable of retreat. But evolution is a powerful force, and the Ravagers that survived the first few days were the ones who had learned to run away. The humans noticed. Brooks, the young woman who had killed her first Ravager with a mining laser, had become one of the colony's most effective hunters. She led a team of 12 people, most of them young like her, all of them angry and determined. They called themselves the Night Wolves, and they had developed a reputation for being absolutely relentless. "They're getting smarter," told her father during a brief rest period. "Yesterday we found a pack that had dug a pit and covered it with branches. They were trying to trap us." Brooks frowned. "That's concerning if they're learning tactics." "Then we learn better tactics. That's how it works." The Ravagers tried several new strategies over the following days. They attacked in larger groups, hoping to overwhelm the human defenders with numbers. The humans responded by setting up overlapping fields of fire, so that any Ravager approaching from any direction would be shot by at least 3 different weapons. The Ravagers tried to destroy the human food supplies, burning fields and killing livestock. The humans moved their supplies underground and rationed what remained. And then something happened that nobody had expected. A group of colonists in the southern settlement of Port Hope discovered that Ravager meat was edible. It was an accident. A woman named Grace Turner had been preparing a meal when a wounded Ravager broke into her home. She killed it with a kitchen knife, stabbing it repeatedly until it stopped moving. Afterward, exhausted and hungry, she looked at the massive carcass lying on her floor. "Seems a waste," she muttered. 3 hours later, she had figured out how to cook Ravager meat. It tasted something like beef mixed with fish, strange but not unpleasant. More importantly, it was protein, and the colony was running low on protein. The news spread quickly. Within days, colonists were not just hunting Ravagers for defense. They were hunting them for food. Admiral Henn received this information in his daily briefing and had to sit down. His second-in-command, Al, asked if he was feeling unwell. "They're eating them," Henn said quietly. "The Ravagers, the most terrifying weapons in the galaxy. The humans are eating them." "Perhaps it's a sign of desperation," Al suggested hopefully. Their supplies must be running low. Look at the casualty reports. Really look at them. Al pulled up the latest numbers. Ravager casualties had reached 8,000. Human casualties were 234. The ratio was getting worse every day. This doesn't make sense, Al said. They have no military training. They have no advanced weapons. How are they doing this? Hen had been asking himself the same question. He had reviewed the intelligence files on humans dozens of times, looking for something he had missed. The files described them as a young species, barely spacefaring, with no history of large-scale warfare beyond their own planet. But buried in the files was one detail that Hen had initially dismissed as unimportant. Humans were persistent predators. On there, they had hunted animals not by being faster or stronger, but by chasing them until they collapsed from exhaustion. A human could run for days without stopping, tracking prey across vast distances, never giving up, never letting the prey rest. The Ravagers were faster than humans. They were stronger than humans, but they needed to sleep eventually. They needed to eat. They needed to rest. The humans just kept coming. Maria Vance finally accepted Admiral Hen's communication request on the 8th day of the invasion. She looked tired, with dark circles under her eyes and a bandage on her left arm where a Ravager claw had grazed her during a night patrol. "Admiral," she said, "I was wondering when you'd call." "Administrator Vance," Hen tried to keep his voice steady, "I'm calling to discuss the situation." "What situation? Your monsters are dying, my people are winning. Seems pretty straightforward to me." "This is temporary. The Ravagers will adapt. They always do." "They're adapting right now. They're adapting by dying." Maria leaned forward and Hen saw something in her eyes that made his scales itch. She wasn't afraid. She wasn't desperate. She was enjoying this. "Your people have suffered losses," Hen tried. "More will die. Is this colony really worth so many lives?" "Let me tell you something about humans, Admiral. We don't abandon our homes. We don't surrender to bullies. And we absolutely do not let anyone hurt our children without consequences. Your children are in danger. Every moment the Ravagers remain active." Maria smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. 2 days ago, a group of teenagers from New Houston went on an unauthorized hunting mission. They killed 73 Ravagers before we could bring them back. Our children are not in danger, Admiral. Your Ravagers are. Hen ended the communication and sat in silence for a long moment. "Sir," Al asked, "what do we do?" "I don't know. I genuinely don't know." On the ground, the war continued. Hank had organized the colony's hunters into a coordinated force, dividing the planet into sectors and assigning teams to each one. They communicated by radio, shared information about Ravager movements, and coordinated ambushes across hundreds of kilometers. It was not a military operation in the traditional sense. There were no uniforms, no ranks, no formal chain of command, but it was devastatingly effective. Earl Tucker, the farmer who had turned his harvester into a killing machine, became famous for driving into Ravager nests and crushing everything inside. His wife Ruth kept count of their kills on the dashboard. By day 10, the count had reached 342. "We're running out of things to kill," Ruth said as they drove home from their latest hunt. "Don't worry, there's plenty more." "That's what I'm worried about. What do we do when they're all dead?" Earl thought about it. "Go back to farming, I guess. Seems peaceful after all this." Ruth laughed. She couldn't help it. Her husband, covered in alien blood, driving a harvester that had become a weapon of war, talking about going back to farming like it was the most normal thing in the world. This was what humans were. This was what they had always been. Adaptable, resilient, and absolutely terrifying when someone tried to take what was theirs. The Ravagers were learning this lesson the hard way. By the end of the second week, their numbers had dropped to under 10,000. Human casualties had reached 300, but the rate was slowing as people learned better tactics and better techniques. The war was not over, but for the first time since the pods had fallen from the sky, everyone knew how it was going to end. The humans were going to win. The last Ravager died on the 23rd day. It was a big one, larger than most, and it had survived by being smart. It had hidden in a cave system in the northern mountains, venturing out only at night to hunt small animals. It had avoided human settlements entirely, seeming to understand that humans meant death. But Brooks found it anyway. She had become the colony's best tracker. Something about the war had changed her, sharpened her senses and instincts until she could read the landscape like a book. Broken branches, disturbed soil, the faint chemical smell that Ravagers left behind wherever they went. She noticed it all. "It's in there," she told her team, pointing at a cave entrance hidden behind a waterfall. "Probably been there for days." Pete Hayes, who had joined her team after his own was disbanded due to lack of targets, checked his weapon. "How do you want to do this?" "Same as always. Flush it out, wait for it to run, shoot it when it does." They set up their positions and threw smoke grenades into the cave. The Ravager came charging out a minute later, confused and angry, its massive form bursting through the waterfall in a spray of water and foam. Shot it through the eye. It was dead before it hit the ground. She walked over to the body and looked down at it for a long moment. 23 days ago, creatures like this had terrified her. Now she felt nothing but a grim satisfaction. "That's the last one," Pete said, checking his scanner. "No more heat signatures anywhere on the continent." Nodded, "Then it's over." The news spread across the colony within hours. People came out of their shelters, blinking in the sunlight like they were seeing it for the first time. There was cheering, crying, people hugging each other and refusing to let go. Maria Vance stood on the steps of the colony administration building and watched her people celebrate. Danny Price stood beside her, looking just as tired as she felt. "We did it," he said. "I can't believe we did it." "I can." Maria had never doubted, not really. She had seen what her people were capable of from the very first night. "Get me a connection to the Dominion flagship. I think it's time for a proper conversation." Admiral Hen accepted the communication immediately. He looked different than he had 3 weeks ago. His skin had taken on an unhealthy pallor, and his 4 eyes were sunken and tired. "Administrator Vance," he said, "I've received reports that the last Ravager has been eliminated." "That's correct. 20,000 of your monsters all dead. We've been burning the bodies for the past few days. The smell is terrible, but we're managing." Hen was silent for a long moment. "This has never happened before. In all the centuries we have used Ravagers, no species has ever defeated them completely. There's a first time for everything." How did you do it? You have no military, no advanced weapons. You're barely a spacefaring civilization." Maria considered the question carefully. "Do you know what Earth is like, Admiral? I've read the files. It seems like a pleasant world. Moderate climate, abundant water." "The files don't tell the whole story. Earth is a death world. We evolved alongside creatures that could kill us in 100 different ways. Giant predators, venomous insects, diseases that could wipe out entire populations. We survived by being smarter, more adaptable, and more stubborn than anything else on the planet." She leaned forward, her eyes meeting the Admiral's through the screen. "Your Ravagers were impressive, but we've been killing impressive things since before we invented the wheel. It's not something we're proud of exactly. It's just what we are." The Galactic Council was informed of the situation within days. The news caused something close to panic among the other species. The Collective, a peaceful federation of plant-based, called an emergency session. "The Dominion's ultimate weapon has been defeated," their representative said, "by a pre-warp civilization using primitive projectile weapons. The implications are staggering." The hive mind, a collective consciousness spread across 3 star systems, requested clarification. Our analysis suggests this should have been impossible. Human physiology indicates a weak, fragile species dependent on technology for survival. The Dominion's representative, looking deeply uncomfortable, tried to explain. The humans proved more resourceful than anticipated. Our intelligence was apparently incomplete. Incomplete? Your Ravagers conquered 17 worlds without a single loss. Now 20,000 of them are dead on a backwater colony planet. This is not an intelligence failure. This is a fundamental misunderstanding of what humans are. The footage from Terran Prime was played for the Council. Representatives watched in horrified fascination as humans hunted Ravagers through forests, drove armored vehicles through packs of the creatures, and used weapons so primitive they belonged in museums. One piece of footage attracted particular attention. It showed Earl Tucker's harvester, covered in steel plates and Ravager blood, plowing through a nest while Ruth Tucker fired a shotgun through the side window. "Pause the recording," the representative requested. "Magnify on the human faces." The image zoomed in on Earl and Ruth. They were both smiling. "They're enjoying it," the representative said quietly. "They're fighting the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy, and they're having fun." "This is consistent with our observations," the hive mind agreed. "Humans appear to derive satisfaction from overcoming extreme challenges. The greater the danger, the more engaged they become." The Dominion's representative tried to salvage the situation. "The humans were lucky. They caught the Ravagers off guard. This will not happen again." "Will it not?" The representative pulled up another file. "According to your own intelligence reports, humans have been practicing what they call sport hunting for their entire history. They deliberately seek out dangerous animals to kill, not for food or defense, but for entertainment. That's barbaric. That's evolution. Humans became the dominant species on their planet by being the most effective predators their world has ever seen. The Ravagers were designed to hunt, but humans were designed to hunt things that could fight back." Admiral Hen was recalled to the Dominion to face a military tribunal. The charges were serious, ranging from incompetence to criminal waste of military resources. But the real damage had already been done. News of Terran Prime spread through the galaxy at faster-than-light speeds. Every species, every civilization, every potential ally and enemy of the Dominion learned what had happened. The Dominion's reputation for invincibility had been destroyed. 3 client species declared independence within a week. 2 more began secret negotiations to leave. A rebellion that had been simmering for years suddenly exploded into open warfare, emboldened by proof that the Dominion could be beaten. And at the center of it all, a small blue and green planet continued to spin through space, its people rebuilding their lives and burying their dead. 412 humans had died defending Terran Prime. Their names were carved into a memorial in the capital city, each one followed by a brief description of how they had fallen. Hayes, who tackled a Ravager to save a group of children. George Palmer, who died protecting his son, who was too slow to dodge a claw but bought her teammates time to escape. Heroes, all of them. Ordinary people who had done extraordinary things when their home was threatened. Maria Vance stood before the memorial on the day it was unveiled. She read each name silently, remembering the faces behind them. "We won't forget you," she said quietly, "and we won't let your deaths be meaningless." Behind her, the colony was already rebuilding. New houses were going up, fields were being replanted, life was continuing as it always did. The galaxy had learned something important about humans that day. They were small, fragile, primitive by galactic standards. But they were not prey. They had never been prey. 3 years after the Battle of Terran Prime, humanity received an invitation to join the Galactic Council. It was an unprecedented move. Most species waited centuries for such an honor, slowly proving themselves through diplomatic achievements and cultural contributions. Humans had proven themselves differently. They had proven themselves by killing 20,000 unkillable monsters with farming equipment and determination. The council chamber was vast, a circular room carved from living crystal on a planet at the center of the galaxy. Representatives from 100 different species sat in tiered seats around a central speaking platform. Some were tall and thin, others short and wide. Some had too many eyes, others had none at all. All of them watched as the human delegation entered. Long walked at the front of the group. She was a former colony administrator who had been on Terran Prime during the invasion, and she had been chosen to represent humanity at the council. She was 52 years old, with hair and calm eyes that had seen things most beings could not imagine. She took her place at the speaking platform and looked around the chamber. "Thank you for this invitation," she said. "Humanity is honored to be here." The representative, a tall plant-like being named Ra, responded first. "Welcome, Ambassador Long. The Council has observed humanity's actions with great interest. Your defeat of the Dominion's Ravagers was remarkable. We prefer to think of it as necessary. Perhaps, but it has raised many questions among the Council members, questions about what humanity truly is." Nodded she had expected this. "Ask whatever you want, I'll answer honestly." The questions came quickly. How had humans developed such effective hunting techniques? How had they organized so quickly without military training? How had they maintained morale when facing such overwhelming odds? Answered each one patiently, explaining the long history of humanity's evolution on Earth. She talked about the ice ages that had forced humans to become resourceful. She talked about the predators that had taught humans to work together. She talked about the diseases and disasters that had made humans resilient. "We're not special," she said finally. "Not in the way you might think. We're not stronger than most species or faster or smarter. But we learned a long time ago that giving up means dying, so we don't give up, ever." The hive mind's representative, a cluster of small insects that spoke with a single voice, asked the question everyone was thinking. "But you enjoy it. We have seen the footage. Your people smile while hunting dangerous creatures. They laugh while fighting for their lives. Why?" Considered this carefully. "I'm not sure I can explain it in a way that makes sense to you. For humans, facing danger is intense. It makes us feel alive in a way that nothing else does. Some of us seek it out. Others just discover it when they have no choice. This seems like a dangerous trait." "It is. Humans have done terrible things because of it, but it's also why we're still here. When most species face extinction, they accept it. Humans fight back. Even when we know we're going to lose, we fight anyway because fighting is better than surrendering." She paused, looking around the chamber at the assembled representatives. The Dominion made a mistake on Terran Prime. They thought they were releasing predators on prey. They were wrong. They were releasing prey into a planet full of predators. We were just waiting for something worth hunting. The Dominion's representative, who had been sitting in uncomfortable silence throughout the session, finally spoke up. "The Dominion does not recognize this aggressive species as a legitimate member of the galactic community. Their acceptance of humans sets a dangerous precedent." Ra's leaves rustled in what had learned was the equivalent of amusement. "With respect, Representative, the Dominion is not in a position to make demands. Your attempt to exterminate a peaceful colony has cost you 3 client species and sparked a rebellion in your outer territories. Perhaps you should be more concerned with your own affairs." The Dominion representative fell silent. After the formal session, was approached by dozens of delegates from different species. Many wanted to establish trade relationships. Others wanted to discuss mutual defense agreements. A few simply wanted to meet a human in person, to see for themselves what kind of species could defeat the Ravagers. The representative from the hive mind spoke to her privately. We have analyzed human history extensively since Terran Prime, it said. We find it deeply concerning. How so? Your species has spent most of its existence at war with itself. You have developed weapons capable of destroying your entire civilization multiple times over. You have polluted driven countless species to extinction, and come close to annihilating yourselves on numerous occasions. Nodded, all true. And yet you have also produced remarkable art, music, and literature. You have shown tremendous capacity for compassion, cooperation, and sacrifice. You have reached for the stars even while struggling with your own worst impulses. Also true. The hive mind was silent for a moment, its insects buzzing quietly among themselves. We do not understand how a species can be so contradictory, so capable of both great good and great evil. Smiled, neither do we honestly. Humans have been trying to figure that out for thousands of years. The best answer I can give you is that we're complicated. We can be cruel and kind, selfish and generous, destructive and creative, sometimes all at once. This does not seem like a sustainable way to exist. Probably not, but it's the only way we know. Back on Terran Prime, life had returned to something approaching normal. The fields were green again. The towns had been rebuilt. Children played in streets that had once been. Hank, now 66 years old, had retired from hunting. He spent most of his days teaching younger colonists how to shoot, passing on skills that he hoped they would never need to use. His grandson, a 10-year-old named Samuel, had become his most dedicated student. The boy had helped reload magazines during the invasion, and the experience had left its mark on him. "Grandpa," Samuel asked one afternoon, "do you think the aliens will come back?" Hank thought about the question as he cleaned his rifle. Maybe. There are a lot of aliens out there, and not all of them are friendly. "Well, we beat them if they do." "We'll certainly try." Samuel was quiet for a moment. "Mom says we shouldn't be proud of what we did. She says killing things isn't something to celebrate." "Your mom is right," Hank said. "Killing isn't something to celebrate, but defending your home, protecting your family, standing up when everyone else wants to run away, that's worth being proud of." He set down the rifle and looked at his grandson. "The universe is big and scary, Samuel. There are things out there that want to hurt us, and there always will be. But as long as humans stick together, as long as we don't give up, we'll be okay. That's what we learned on Terran Prime. That's what we've always known." Maria Vance, now serving as the colonial governor, gave a speech on the 3rd anniversary of the invasion. She stood before the memorial, with the names of the 412 fallen colonists carved in stone behind her. "3 years ago, we were told to surrender our home. We refused. We were told we couldn't win. We proved them wrong. We were told that humans were weak, fragile, unsuited for survival in a hostile galaxy." She gestured at the memorial. "These people proved that wrong. Every farmer who picked up a rifle, every miner who built a weapon, every parent who stood between their children and danger. They showed the universe what humans are made of." She paused, looking out at the crowd. Thousands of colonists had gathered, along with representatives from a dozen different species who had come to witness the ceremony. "We are not the strongest species in the galaxy. We are not the fastest or the most advanced, but we are human, we survive, we adapt, we protect what we love, and we never ever give up." The crowd cheered. Humans and aliens alike applauded the speech, recognizing the truth in her words. In orbit above the planet, a new defense station was being constructed. It was a joint project between humanity and 3 other species, designed to ensure that no one would ever threaten Terran Prime again. The galaxy had changed since the Battle of Terran Prime. The Dominion's power was crumbling. New alliances were forming. Species that had lived in fear for centuries were finding the courage to stand up for themselves. And at the center of it all, humanity was finding its place among the stars, not as conquerors or victims, but as what they had always been. Survivors, fighters, the species that looked at the darkness of space and said, "We belong here too." The Dominion had made a terrible mistake, dropping their war beasts on a human planet. The galaxy would never make that mistake again.